We got one more guest, one more segment here for this Thursday edition of the show. That is John Ryan, professional handicapper at John Ryan Sports and the #1 on Twitter. John, how's it going today, man?
I'm doing well, Adam. How about you?
Doing very well, buddy. Been a busy week, to say the least here. And, it'd be nice to talk something other than baseball for a little bit here, as we're going to talk NBA and some college basketball stuff. We'll do our usual NBA buy and sell, and we'll take a look at the card for the Big Ten tonight and also take a look at this upcoming weekend in the Big East. But, John, something that I know you wanted to touch on here at the top of today's segment, we talk all the time about how there are a lot of similarities between the betting market and the actual market, and you wanted to kind of touch on that today at the top of the segment.
Yeah, I think we have a good example going on right now with the coronavirus situation affecting Wall Street the way it is. And what's interesting about it is we've always talked about the betting flows, and when the public has an irrational exuberance, to take former Fed Chairman Greenspan's words, when the public is betting in a frenzy on one team, and the frenzy meaning 75% and above, that's usually a red flag. And many times when my math is actually on the other side, it produces a pretty powerful situation. And this is the exact same process that I go through trading currencies, trading the S&P 500 futures, trading crude oil. And before the collapse, the sentiment readings for the S&P 500 were approaching the mid-80s, which is one of the highest levels I've seen in more than 20 years. That's not to say we're in a bubble like we had with the NASDAQ crash. I'm not suggesting that at all. This is totally focused on the virus and how it's going to impact the global economy and how it could impact us here in the United States. But I did find it quite interesting that you get those extremes, and there's no fear. Everybody's bullish. Everything's great. Economy's never been better, and there's not really any negativity to even look at until this coronavirus hit. Now all of a sudden we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater with these huge declines. We have 5 big ones in a row here, and now sentiment is going to shift to the other side, where if you told somebody you were buying stock, they think you were crazy. But it probably is getting close to that time to be doing that, just as we do in the sports. Penn State last night was 65% of the bets were on them. So for the first half there, Penn State looked great. They were up 21 at one point and had an 18-point halftime lead. And then the team Rutgers, that wasn't liked by the betting public, all of a sudden mounted an incredible comeback, actually took the lead with 30 seconds to go. Penn State nailed a 3 to win it. Pretty close to the buzzer, too. It was under 20 seconds. So there's another example in sports that correlates to what I was talking about with the market, Wall Street market, where you have 65% of the bets are on Penn State. And granted, that's not a red flag. That's probably too many. But the point is that the line did not move. When you have 65%, you would usually think the line would go up at least half a point, maybe a point. And it didn't. And in some places, it actually dropped a half. And that means that the bigger size bets, the so-called smart money, the professionals, were on Rutgers. And Rutgers came back and they covered. So just wanted to point that out.
Well, in general, we start with the NBA here typically on our segments, but let's go ahead and do some of that college basketball stuff, especially because we got a 4-pack of games here in the Big Ten for tonight. You got Wisconsin and Michigan, Indiana, Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern, and Ohio State, Nebraska. Obviously, as we know, Northwestern, Nebraska, the 2 worst teams here in the Big Ten for this season. But, John, I'll let you determine where we start here in terms of the games that we talk about. So which one's first on your radar here for the Big Ten this evening?
The Michigan game is pretty big here. The Big Ten article that I write for you in Bang the Book, the record combined with the Big East report is 26-9. I think that comes out to like 74%. So I did mention this game in the article, but now we have today's game day, so we have all the metrics, all my machine learning stuff readily available, and just gonna quick pull this up here too.
Yeah, we got Michigan a 6.5 point favorite here in this one, total of 130. And, Michigan's a team very inconsistent here, as I think we kind of expected, in the first year with Juwan Howard. They played very, very well at the outset, struggled in the middle, seemed to be a little bit slow to adjust, as you and I have talked about here on the previous segments. But you think this is a good spot for the Wolverines tonight?
I do. They've actually turned the ship around. A couple shows ago, I guess I was probably ranting about Juwan Howard's refusing to identify the fact that big men on the opposing team were just annihilating him. A guy like Garza just destroyed him all by himself. So what that was going on there was the defensive presence on the perimeter was outstanding, but it opened up the paint for these big guys on the opposing teams to have one-on-one matchups that they just dominated. And I thought until they got that fixed and stopped worrying about the three so much, that Michigan was just going to be another team in the Big Ten. However, they have turned it around, and not just for that reason. They've really gotten their act together. They've ripped off 5 in a row now, and have climbed the standings just like Ohio State is doing. So Michigan has won 5 in a row against the spread and straight up. And there's a system that's gone 75, 38, and 2 against the spread for 65% winners. And it has an excellent p-value, which we had discussed briefly, I think, on the first show. And a p-value is essentially telling you, are the parameters that you're using just luck that have produced these results, or are they really for real and they work together? So this one has an excellent correlation among the parameters. So there's a lot of meaning behind this, and it should do well for many, many seasons to come. So this system is to play on home favorites of 3 to 9.5 points that are coming off an upset win over a conference foe, and in a game involving both teams with win percentages between 60 and 80% on the season. So it's pretty simple. I mean, there's nothing real fancy with that combination of parameters. But that supports Michigan tonight, and I think Michigan will win comfortably in this game.
So we moved down a spot here on the board game. 6-15, 6-16 in the Big Ten this evening is Indiana and Purdue. You got Purdue a 6-point favorite here in this one. Are you looking to back the chalk, or do you like the dog a little bit in that one?
This is a tough game to call, Adam. In my opinion, Indiana is right in the hunt. They should make the dance as well. They're 18-9, but everybody wants to get to that 20-win level. I believe there's 8 teams in the Big Ten with 18 or more wins, which is incredible. I had said in the article that this week's poll would have 7 Big Ten teams in it. I was off 1. They had 6. But at some point, maybe it's next week, they will have 7 in the top 25, and they could send as many as 9 and possibly 10 teams to the NCAA tournament. So Indiana is in a situation here going against Purdue, who was ranked at one point this season, but fell apart and sits at 14-14 right now. So on the surface, you would think Indiana just rolls in there and gets the win and leaves. Whether they can cover as road chalk, that's where I'm not so sure that you can trust them to do that. As dumb as it sounds, Adam, it's like one of these games where if you bet Indiana, they're going to cover by double digits, or they're going to lose the game. So it's really a game I think I would pass on. And that's about all I see there.
Yeah, I look at Purdue, and one of the things that's concerning, we kind of look for trend lines for these teams. And, obviously we do this with the NBA buy and sell segment. The last 4 games for Purdue defensively have not been very good. And we know that early on in the season, they were a very, very stout defensive team. And even early on in the Big Ten portion of the season, they were a very stout defensive team. But over their last 4 games here, 1.282 points per possession allowed to Penn State, 1.006 to Ohio State, 1.148 to Wisconsin. We know that Wisconsin's not a super gifted offense. I mean, obviously they're competent like everybody else in the Big Ten, but they're not an elite level offense. and then 1.055 to Michigan last time out. Purdue's struggling on the defensive end. And, at this time of the year, when you start looking at trend lines for these teams, I think it makes it tough to lay that 6 number with them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yes, also have to question Purdue. There's a fine line when you know you're out of it and you're not going to the dance. There's a fine line in performance levels. The kids are still going out there and playing hard and trying to win the game. But, fractions of a second are the difference between a bucket going in and a shot getting blocked or deflected. And that's the big unknown with Purdue. I was just looking at the betting flows here, Adam, and it clearly has the public is definitely on Indiana, which is not surprising. So the line opened at 7. It's now down to 6, despite only 30% of the bets that are being made so far are on Purdue. So that indicates to me that the smart money, the bigger size bets are backing the Boilermakers. And the public is on the 18-win Indiana Hoosiers. So that adds more confusion to me. In other words, I would love to bet Indiana. I don't want to bet Purdue. I would not take a team like Purdue and lose. If that makes any sense. You want to put good money on a team like Purdue in their situation right now. Looking for the big upset win. I'd rather lose money on the team that's better, and in this case, Indiana's the better team.
A couple other games in the Big Ten tonight. You've got Illinois laying 6 or 6.5, depending on where you look, at Northwestern. You got Ohio State laying almost doubles on the road in Lincoln against Nebraska. We talked about this. You think Ohio State really rounding into form here nicely, and as you kind of look at some of the things that they've done here recently, they've battled injuries. They've battled a lot of adversity here throughout the year, but a very solid team there for Chris Holtmann. Are you looking to lay the road lumber tonight? You like the Dogs a little bit? What are you thinking about those two games?
I think you lay the lumber, especially with Ohio State. And I probably sound like a broken record, but Michigan State, Ohio State were the preseason teams that were expected to be at the top, and they've had some wild games, wild losses, some really poor games played, some really great games played. But now they're coming up in everybody's rearview mirror that is on top of the standings. The Marylands, the Penn States. The tournament is just going to be unbelievable because I couldn't pick a winner right now to save my life. If you told me any one of those 9 teams or 10 teams that can make the tournament, I think you can make a case for any one of them to win the Big Ten tournament that's coming up. In fact, that tournament might actually end up being more exciting than the March Madness itself, if that's even possible. But in terms of Ohio State, the same system that I mentioned with Michigan also applies to this one. And there's another one here that supports Illinois and also supports Ohio State. And this system is another good one. Or I wouldn't be talking about it, I guess. So this one is you're going to bet on road favorites of 3.5 to 10 points that have a winning record on the season and who are facing a host that has lost 15 or more of their last 20 games, which is Nebraska, and has a win percentage between 20 and 40% on the season. So again, another simple group of parameters that work together, and it's, the fancy word is a combinatorial algorithm. So you can tell that it's just a fancy word, and really this is a pretty good example of that. So that clearly supports Illinois, and I think Ohio State as well. So I'm just looking at another note here. Northwestern is also not so hot when they're only playing their second game of the week. So over a 7-day span, if this is their second game, they're 9-21-1 against the spread in games played over the last 2 seasons. In the Nebraska game with Ohio State, Nebraska is 8-20 against the spread over the last two seasons, facing a solid ball handling team that is averaging less than 14 turnovers per game after the 15th game of the regular season has been played. So 15th is usually the last game before conference play starts. That's also the worst record in the Big Ten, 8-20 when playing good ball handling teams. And they're 3-9 against the spread this season playing those types of teams.
One more other simple trend, system, whatever you want to call it here. I know friend of the show, Ralph Michaels, has talked about this before, and I know he does a lot of stuff with the Killer Sports database and looking up systems and things like you do, with different sets of parameters. This is an important one to kind of take a look at here late in the season, is that teams that are going for, sort of benchmark numbers, 20 wins, 25 wins, teams trying to get to 500 or get over 500, something like that. As a general rule, obviously we're talking about straight up records here, but as a general rule, those teams that are trying to get, to those round numbers or to those multiples of 5, whatever you want to call it, they wind up being pretty good teams to play on. So that's something for you to keep an eye on here as we go through the rest of the regular season, conference tournament games, stuff like that. Teams looking to get to some sort of benchmark are generally good play on teams. So again, not a blind bet situation. Obviously, you still want to handicap the game and look at the matchup between the two teams. But, if you're kind of on the fence about a game, could be part of the determining factor for you.
Yeah, I agree, because the motivation factor for those teams that have 19 wins and you're trying to get to that magical 20 is much higher when the opponent has a losing record, for example, like we mentioned with the Purdue game. I like that a lot. That has a lot of merit.
All right, so we talked Big East here for a few minutes before we get into the NBA, and we got 3 games coming up here on Saturday, couple more coming your way on Sunday. Seton Hall and Marquette, Providence, Villanova, DePaul, Butler are your Saturday games. On Sunday, Xavier, Georgetown, and Creighton on the road at St. John's, where they'll be laying a nice number there against the Johnnies. So anything that you kind of have on we're obviously a couple days in advance of these games. We don't have lines on them. But you do a week-long Big East preview over at BangTheBook.com. I encourage everyone to check out. Anything about those 5 games? Any one or two of those stand out to you here, at least as you're thinking about them in about 48 hours' time?
They do. I'm trying to figure out which one to speak about right now. It's basically come down to 4 teams that actually have a shot to win the regular season. Seton Hall has been I don't want to use the word sputtering, but they've been giving the other teams some hope that they can be caught. And the big game for them this week is when they take on Marquette on Saturday. So we have Marquette that played last night against Georgetown and won 93-72 and covered as 9-point favorites. And Villanova played St. John's, and they grinded out the win. The line was 12.5. They won by 11, so St. John's got the cover. So the games that are coming up now become even more intense and more important for Villanova, Seton Hall, Butler, especially Creighton, and Xavier, I would put in there with Butler. So the most important game next is when Seton Hall takes to the road to play Marquette. I think Marquette you'll see as a 2-point favorite in this game. One advantage that Seton Hall has is that this is the first game they're playing in 5 days. Marquette's coming off the game last night, so their rest will be 2 days. That definitely favors Seton Hall here. It kind of up the added rest partially offsets the fact that they're on the road. But if Seton Hall loses that game, then things really, really tighten up in the standings. So that's probably the most important game for the week. And should Seton Hall lose, that means the games on Saturday become huge. So Saturday sees, as I said, Seton Hall will travel to Marquette. Providence is traveling to Villanova. And Providence is the type of team that is just dangerous at home. No one wants to travel and play Providence in Providence. So Villanova catches a break here. They'll probably be 8.5, 9-point favorites. Butler will be hosting DePaul. They'll be favored by probably double digits. I have them at 10. Creighton, who in my power ratings is the best team in the Big East, they're going to be 9-point road favorites at St. John's. And now I'm already into next week.
So let me ask you about this here. I know that you rely a lot on the machine learning tools, but I'm kind of interested to get your take on this because over at BangTheBook.com for today, I wrote up a preview of the it's not a battle for first place in the Summit League necessarily, but it's South Dakota State and North Dakota State. South Dakota State can win the regular season title if they win tonight. If they don't, they need some help because North Dakota State, with a game in hand, they play on Saturday, and there's a whole bunch of tiebreaker procedures and things of that sort. But the thing I kind of keyed in on a little bit with South Dakota State is that there's a been there, done that factor for them. They've won the conference tournament the last 3 years. They generally win the conference regular season as well. Seton Hall, not normally in this type of position. So, it's kind of an unquantifiable angle. And as somebody who looks at, a lot of analytics, a lot of quantifiable scenarios, I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on that sort of been there, done that factor, as we're deciding some of these conference regular season championships.
That's a good point. Historically, it's pretty easy on the databases to identify teams that were in the playoffs last year, both for the professional sports and the college. So playoffs, obviously, in the hardwood is the tournaments. So it's easy to identify if the team was or was not in the conference tournament in the previous year. And those teams that are perennial teams that are in their tournaments do have a huge advantage over facing a team that is in there for the first time in, say, 5 years. I'm trying to think of a team off the top of my head that's going to be in the tournament for the first time in quite a while. Well, Penn State, but they've been in the tournament. They haven't been in the NCAA tournament since 2011. So Penn State will have an experience, especially with Lamar Stevens being a four-year senior, I should say. And that leadership does pay dividends in the tournament. There's no question about it. The hard part is determining that the fact that everybody knows that, and the line does reflect the public sentiment. So the public knows that, they got senior leadership, they've been there, done that. So I do think sometimes that's factored into the line and can cause lines to get inflated a little bit. But that's the real hard part to dissect the line and figure out how much of it is assuming that a team is like a Duke is going to just blow out whoever they're playing because they haven't been in the tournament in 6 years.
All right, so with that, let's go over to the NBA side of things here for a few minutes with guys that, are professionals who would sort of expect a little bit more of a consistent, effort from the guys that know how to win here at this time of the year. And we like to look at buys and sells. We talked at the top of the segment about some of the different things that are happening out there in the market. And, right now it's something like a coronavirus. And, when we talk about it in the context of sports, it could be a lot of different reasons why we're looking to buy or sell teams. So as we take a look here for this week, John, for the week ahead, who are some buy teams that you're looking at here right now in the NBA?
The buys would be, I like buying the Pacers right now. When they get Oladipo back, and I didn't see the time schedule or the date that he is going to be back playing, but I think that's a team that could end up being a surprise challenge to the Bucks. The Bucks are just steamrolling everybody, and I had to play, based on the math, as I call it, instead of fancy words. But it was the one play was the Sixers, and Ben Simmons played 5 minutes, and I was annihilated. It was a horrible call, and sometimes even though the Bucks are by far the best team in the NBA right now, they don't get overbought, to use the Wall Street term. They're not playing at an excess level where they're going to revert back to the mean. If anything, they're going to get better from this point on. So I would highly recommend not to fade them anytime soon. It's much better to wake up the next morning and say, boy, I wish I would have bet against them because the team covered the spread. That's much better than trying to fade the Giant. So I would be a buyer only on Milwaukee. I like the Pacers going forward as well. On the sell side, Adam, I'm really starting to get some topping action on the Lakers. One game tonight really sticks out. I can do queries at the player level. So as we know, LeBron had a huge game, first one he ever played against Zion. He had 40 points. Fantastic game. But what happens next is not so fantastic. So if the next game coming off a 40-point game is against an opponent that has a win percentage below 35, LeBron's teams are 1-12 with one push against the spread. So they're playing Golden State tonight, who, obviously we all should think that the Lakers will blow out the Warriors. But Golden State is 13-5. They're a 13.5-point underdog, and the Lakers are 7-23 against the spread when facing these type of poor teams that are outscored by their opponents by at least 3 points per game in the last two seasons. So that's the 2 seasons that LeBron's been in LA. So that gives you a pause for thought right away in backing the Lakers and just presuming that it's going to be a 25-point win. If I will be on Golden State tonight, if that means anything.
No, it definitely does mean something, especially because, we had an article from another handicapper, Dave Essler, over at BangTheBook.com on Monday with regards to the Cavs and Heat game. And, the premise of that article was just sort of saying, sometimes the bad bet, quote unquote, is the one to make. You got to take that ugly dog, that untouchable dog that nobody wants to take, or that, ugly favorite who everyone thinks is favored by too many points, stuff like that. Those are all hallmarks of the things that you do too, John. You try to find those undervalued and overvalued situations, and a lot of times they're kind of unappetizing, but you know what? It's more important to win games than it is to have pretty bets on the card.
Yeah, I've heard that from some of the new clients that we got on board here in the last month, because I can see it too, that they get the first couple reports on what teams to bet on, and they have to be going, what? I'm going to bet on the Minnesota Timberwolves? Are you kidding me? But then the whole methodology is based on the long term. One day of going 5-0 is not going to be the reason why the season has been a strong success. It's grinding it out each day, as you know, and working the same way, whether the previous day was 0-3 or whether it was 3-0, and just knowing with confidence that by the end of the season, it's going to be a nice season. So on the Indiana side, there is a system here that's pretty good as well. It's 71-12 straight up for 86%, 56-25 with 2 pushes for 69% over the last 5 seasons. And this is playing on home favorites, in this case Indiana, that is revenging a road loss to the current opponent of at least 10 points or more, and that the team, Indiana, is coming off a home win of double digits. So Indiana coming off a home win, 10 points or more, and has revenge against the opponent. That's essentially it. And that's another consistent money maker over time. It'll have its bad weeks or bad months. It'll go 1-4 at some point. It's all part of that process. You don't get a system that. No, I'm trying to say here, Adam, that you can have a system that's made money like this one in 5 consecutive seasons. That's fantastic. But you also have to realize that in any given month, it could give back a significant amount of it. But over the course of the year, you know that it's gonna end up on the plus side.
We can find a lot of those great systems and angles on John's Twitter page over at John Ryan Sports and the number 1. What else you got going on over there right now, John?
Well, the last week was a big success with the 3 free days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So some of the people even signed up Thursday afternoon, which is today, and of course they got 4 then. But I want to do it one more time because it's really been enjoyable to meet all these new people, and I make an effort to send a direct message and and find out what they like, what they don't like with betting. What information I could provide that would possibly help them with their handicapping stuff. So it's really been enjoyable. So we'll do that again this week. We'll use the I'm drawing a blank on a password. What should we use?
I don't know. How about Vegas? Vegas sounds good.
All right, Vegas sounds good. So the word Vegas, and you get all the way to through Sunday's action. That way you can test drive this thing and you can see for yourself the contrarian plays that are most of the plays. They're not always that. There's times where I am on a favorite and the public's on the favorite and it works out. And it's a combination of everything. It's not just a contrarian type of position.
Well, definitely sounds like a great opportunity over there, John. I hope everybody takes advantage of that. And kudos to you for doing very well with the articles and with your picks since we got you here on the show. And you've been a great asset. We definitely enjoy having you. And I'm looking forward to chatting about the month of March with you as well.
Yeah, I can't wait for that, Adam. I appreciate the kudos here, too. And one last thing, your Major League Baseball preview publication is second to none. And, I recommend that for everybody that's listening, that right when this show is over, you go to the site and download the PDF and enjoy it, because it's information that's very, very important, but it's also written in a way that everybody, a beginning bettor can understand, a veteran can understand and appreciate and utilize. It's a tremendous resource it's 100% certain to help your betting in Major League Baseball and get more wins than losses.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. Make sure you follow John on Twitter at John Ryan Sports and the number 1. John, appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll chat with you again next week.
You got it, Adam. Thanks.